Welcome to the Songwriters Across Texas podcast. This state has a lot to offer, and music is one of its greatest exports. On this podcast, we get to know songwriters through their stories and hear some of their music. Today we're at Arlyn Studios, and my guest is Guy Forsyth. I'm Karl Anderson, and this is the Songwriters Across Texas podcast. Born into a family whose father worked for Trans World Airlines, it seems Guy Forsyth was destined to travel. He lived in several different states, and he enjoyed them all for their unique cultures. He also loved music, or more importantly, singing. He realized he could learn every word of every song and sing along, and it felt good, like it was his thing. He picked up a harmonica at 16 and a guitar shortly thereafter. Every type of music appealed to him, but it was at the age of 18 when he saw John Hammond in Lawrence, Kansas, where he realized the depths of sophisticated musical intent, and he was in hot pursuit. When he moved to Austin, he fell in with several different local music scenes. He pulled from each scene to build the renowned Asylum Street Spankers. In his solo career, he's made dozens of records, and he has opened up for Ray Charles, Dr. John, B.B. King, Lucinda Williams, and many others. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the show, Guy Forsyth. Hey, Guy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Carl.
Thanks for being here. What are you going to start us off with?
This is a song that I wrote called Snakes Around My Trailer, which I wrote because there were snakes around my trailer. The odds, unfortunately, in Texas are not zero when you open your front door that there will be a venomous beast there waiting for you.
Indeed.
You know, possibly, four-legged, two-legged, six-legged, eight-legged, or no-legged.
No-legged.
Yeah, no, so.
Slithery.
There are snakes around my trailer. I found a scorpion in my bed. Snakes around my trailer. I found a scorpion in my bed. Oh, if Texas has its way, I could wake up dead. Black mold underneath the sheetrock and paper wasps in the eaves. You know, I try to keep up with the upkeep, but an honest man may be deceived. Oh, God help the child set upon by thieves. Now it's a jacked up day where I wake up and I'm already late. Going through the front door, I wonder what I run for. Meet my fate. If Texas had its way, well, I'd be gone without a trace. 100 right behind me to take my place. Hot sun working in the red clay, and it cracks like a chain. Hell in August, Texas, fools pray for rain. Ah, you dumb sons of bitches, hurricane. And if it wasn't trying to kill you, it wouldn't be Texas. If you ain't got the fight, you won't make it here. See that cowboy hat driving that Lexus? Man, man, that wicked grin from here to here. The fight, you won't make it here. See that cowboy hat driving that Lexus? Man, that wicked grin from here to here. Now it's a jacked up day where I'll wake up and I'm already late. Bolting through the front door, I wonder what I run for. 100 right behind me to take my place. There are snakes around my trailer. I found a scorpion in my bed. If Texas has its way, there will be bloodshed. And if trouble makes a man, I'm a thoroughbred. Texas, Texas. It's a true story.
I live here. I know. That's a great song, man.
Thank you very much.
I had a hard time sitting down that whole time. I really was going to throw my headphones off and get up and start jumping around. That's hot, man. I love the tone of that guitar.
Oh, this is
not a guitar. What do you call that?
It's a type of guitar. It's a national Reso-Phonic guitar from the National Guitar Company, which is a style of guitar that was invented by a Czechoslovakian immigrant by the name of John Dopier, who came to the United States with the idea to kinetically amplify an instrument. His original idea was for violin, but the National Guitar Company bought his patent and applied it to guitars, and they're loud and they're directional. So before electric guitars were common and accessible, this was a way that people tried to get around the fact that the guitar has traditionally been a parlor instrument, something that you can only really play with like a couple of people around a room.
Right.
But I love these guitars because they are so loud. And we were talking, and you mentioned in the intro, John Hammond. The first time I saw somebody play a resonator guitar was John Hammond playing at the Jazz House in Lawrence, Kansas. And whatever that is, I don't even know what that is. Whatever that is, that's what I want.
Right.
You know, I want to do that thing that he's doing.
Right.
And I pretty much started as a street musician, so volume was an issue. You know, like your ability to try to play above street noise mattered.
Absolutely.
And these guitars were really popular in the 1920s and 1930s because they're just so loud. And and also, I think that they represent a real voice of American music, built by an immigrant.
Which, and that,
So
I know that
obviously.
means a lot to you, that you're very connected to the history of things. I was just going to add that for that particular guitar, there's a tone to it that, so that not only was it loud, but it's not an acoustic tone.
No, it has a mid-range spike. It's really, it honks.
Yeah.
It's very different. It's somewhere between like an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar, the way it speaks.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. It goes well with the way that song. It was perfect for that song. So you said you started up on the street, but before that, you were a little kid. You didn't just come out of the womb with a guitar in your hand.
No, that would have been really painful for my mom, I'm sure. I didn't come from a really musical family, although my family were big music fans. My folks met at the University of Arizona, and they had similar record collections and got married, which is as good a reason as I've heard yet.
Yeah, music. Absolutely.
And I have an older brother who's a year and a half older than me, and so when we were growing up, they went through their record collection and they gave us all the scratched up records and a little Fisher-Price record player.
Right on.
So at the same age I was learning how to stack blocks, I was learning how to drop the needle on a record and listen to music, and that's what I did for play.
Right.
To
go with your blocks, you had tunes.
Yeah.
And that your little Fisher, we had one of those. That you said that the music was similar. They both had a similar, but it was not country.
It was like Western music. So it was I was born in '68. So it's the late part of the 50s, early part of the 60s, and America was going through a real love affair with its imagined version of the West that Hollywood was coming up with.
Yes.
And popular music of the day reflected that. And some of the records that I listened to were like
Marty Robbins, the Gunfighter Ballads by Marty Robbins, Frankie Lane, the Sons of the Pioneers. So it's all, like Western music, but it's Western music as interpreted through Hollywood, honestly.
Right.
So, but it was still beautiful music, and it was well played. And I got used to scratchy records, and if I repeat myself, I come by it honestly. And that sort of love for old sounding recordings really brought me into the next phase where I started to listen to the radio a whole lot, and would stay up late at night to hear Dr. DeMento play the Funny Five, and he would play novelty records on the radio, and it would go all the way till midnight, and I was like 6 or something like that, trying to hide underneath the covers with a little transistor radio and listen to the records. And Dr. DeMento has one of the greatest record collections ever, and he plays a lot of old records, like old 78s and things like that.
Yeah.
That have sort of sound like this, and like that. And so I'm fine with music sounding like that.
Me too.
And when I got older, I would go to the library and I realized that you could get you could listen to the records there for free. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of records. So I was psyched to find that I could just go to the library and pull stuff off the shelves. And I would pull everything off the shelves, listening to great speeches of the 20th century, and operas and stuff like that. But I found a recording of Robert Johnson, and Robert Johnson sounded different than everything else that I had heard up to that point.
Yeah.
Robert Johnson was one of the great blues songwriters, and someone who came along at a sweet spot where technology was accessible to small business as opposed to needing to be in, like Edison.
Yeah.
Because, Edison recorded some music too and was a really smart guy, but he passed on signing Bessie Smith, so he couldn't have been that smart.
That's right.
And a lot of the recordings that they made down here in Texas in the 1930s were made with a portable recording setup. They recorded at the Gunther Hotel down in Dallas for some of them, rather in San Antonio for some of them, and
onto the acetates.
Yeah, and that music just sounded so totally different. Now, Robert Johnson was a really smart guy. He was a really good musician, he needs to get the props for all of this.
Right.
Because he was doing remarkable work as a songwriter. People, tend to classify him as he's a country blues player. But as a songwriter, someone putting together verses in a way that works and stands up, and that escapes the nature of what music was before recording, because people would play songs for hours before that. Like Glenn Allen had a great book about Mance Lipscomb called I Say Me for a Parable, where he wrote down a lot of conversations that he had with Mance Lipscomb. Mance Lipscomb would talk about playing parties where he would play a song like Key to the Highway for 30 minutes. And they would just make up verse or repeat the same verses, because people are drinking and partying and have a good time.
Background music.
And well, they're holding space, right?
Yeah.
They're holding space for the party. And so when they first started to record roots musicians, they'd turn it on, they'd sing, and they'd say, okay, stop. But Robert Johnson's the first generation of people that listened to records and then made a record.
Right.
And so his approach was different. It was conceptual.
Right.
So that changed my life, hearing that stuff.
Did you hear it on vinyl too?
Yeah, nice. Just pulling a record off the shelf, and there's something there, and it was hard for me to make the connection. I was fascinated with it, but I did not necessarily understand it.
Right.
There was so much mystery to the music, especially at that time, where the only information you got was the liner notes on the back of the record.
Right.
And there were a couple books that had come out then, but I was a white kid in the suburbs of Kansas City at that point.
Right.
And my connection to this music, absolutely none. I'm a white kid in the suburbs, which has basically had all elements of culture washed away and replaced with consumerism.
Right.
And so there was the music that I was hearing on the radio, which at that time was prog rock, bands like Yes, which are great musicians, but it didn't necessarily apply to me.
Wasn't talking to you, right.
It just was so much on the pedestal, of artistic ability, yes, but also, economically distant because that sort of studio recording was not the thing that I was doing in the basement.
Yeah, for sure. Alan White, by the way, R.I.P. to Alan White, who just passed away. The Yes drummer.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd chuck that out there.
Understood.
Because I'm like,
Understood.
yes.
Represent. But I got a harmonica for Christmas when I was 16. My dad was in the travel business, and he started a business selling travel books and maps after he left TWA.
That's cool,
and he came back from a convention once with a gift for me and a gift for my brother that were books from a company called the Klutz Press. And the Klutz Press.
Klutz.
And the one that I got was Country and Blues Harmonica for the Musically Hopeless. And it came with a cassette tape and a Pocket Pal 10-hole cheap Hohner harmonica, and that was the first instrument that I learned how to play. And just by listening to the cassette tape, taught by a guy named John Gindick, who's still alive today, still teaching. And that's how I started to play instruments. I was listening to a lot of music, and I loved to sing, but I didn't play an instrument.
Right. So you needed something to get you, like, actually attach you.
To get in the game.
Yeah,
I want to be in the
game.
game. I want to,
right.
I want to play. And so for years, I kept that harmonica in my pocket, and I was playing it every opportunity. And every time I'd see anybody with a guitar, I'd be like, "Hey, can I play?"
Right.
I'd like to make a formal apology to everybody in the whole world for being that guy with the harmonica by the side of the stage who will not shut up. I was totally that guy because I was so hungry for it. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have an in.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody there to go, "Oh yeah, you're a talented kid, let's record a record," or something like that. I just wanted it really bad in the worst way. And the worst way is being that guy by the side of the stage with the harmonica.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you show up enough times, they start to go, I guess this kid really wants to be here, right?
And I would sneak into clubs in Kansas City as soon as I was able to, and there were some really nice bands, folks like Lonnie Ray and the Blues All Stars band in Kansas City, who just like, what a nice kid,
Right.
and they,
Nice.
they let me on stage. They gave me pointers afterwards, don't do this.
Right.
That thing you did, don't do that.
Right.
Which is good.
It's
People
excellent.
need that sort of feedback. It really matters. And going to blues jams and just opportunities to play. Because
Kansas City was a great place for you for that because there's a lot
there's so much history in Kansas City. Some of it, there's so much history in Kansas City in blues and jazz. And I was coming in from the suburbs. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody. I was just wandering into clubs I probably had no business being in, but people were really kind to me.
because you belonged there in the end, and so you had protection.
And also, if you're showing respect,
Yeah.
people answer with respect. If you have no respect, there's no reason why someone's going to give you respect.
Exactly. If you come in all demanding something,
Right.
Yeah.
Like you're owed something when you're not. Music doesn't owe you anything.
That's right.
We're lucky to play in it.
That's right. That's right. So you get you're not you kind of hubbing out of Kansas City, but you're traveling a lot.
Well, when I was growing up, my dad worked for TWA, and I describe it as sort of like being an Army brat because we lived. I was born in Colorado, moved to Kansas City, moved to New York, moved to Connecticut, moved back to Kansas City. Kansas City was the hub for TWA. Then
Right.
moved to California, another place in California. My dad started his own business. We moved back to Kansas City because it was in the middle of the U.S. and he was doing a mail order business, so it was better to do it from there.
Right.
When I turned 21, I moved down to Austin. I had seen Austin because I was working doing Renaissance festivals for a while as a stuntman doing sort of comedy fight shows. I played Robin Hood in a Robin Hood and Little John show,
Okay.
which obviously looks like me getting beat up, multiple times a day all through the weekend. But it took me to some really cool
Show
places.
business.
Like we did the Metairie Festival in Louisiana. So you work on the weekend, and then for the rest of the week you're just camping. And so we would go into the quarter and see stuff in the quarter and see the jazz bands and the blues bands and the street scene. And it was just like, oh, this is getting
Right.
more exciting all the time. And I
Like the circus.
I thought I was going to be an actor, but I ended up being a musician because this way I can write and star in my own production, and I
Yeah.
don't have to wait to work,
Right.
which is definitely desirable.
Right. You started and you had theater. You were doing some theater. and
Yeah,
that's
I did theater in school, and I did some theater outside of school while I was growing up. But And I really thought that's what I wanted.
Right. But that Renaissance thing was important to you, right? Because you were like, boy, this is like the circus. I want to join up in this.
Yeah, everybody there was weird and different in a way that if it exists in the suburbs, usually it's hidden, because you can't show it.
Right.
But it was like running away and joining the circus and going to places like Sterling, New York, and Metairie, Louisiana, and it was just like getting to go places and getting to meet
California.
people and seeing how different people lived and how wide the scope of experience can be. So many different things that are offered to you, which are not the things you're being sold in the suburbs.
You were really hip to that early on.
I can't say why. I definitely have empathetic, intelligent parents who did a good job, who really cared and did their best. Mm-hmm. And they were really trying to share the world, even if the world that they were sharing was still just like the world that I'm trying to share for my daughters is limited, because it's limited by my own experience. I want them to have the whole world, and I want to share the things that I think that are great. People are at their best when they're sharing things that they love.
Absolutely.
So you want to do that, but you can't limit it, because who are you? You're just the parent.
Right. Right. I think we were talking about that earlier when the cameras weren't rolling, that there's this whole, certainly in the West, that you better do what your parents say, and my parents, they encouraged me to be an actor and a writer, but they didn't think I would do it for a living, and they didn't know how to encourage me to do it for a living. They, why don't you go be a teacher? They wanted me to do something safe, I think, and I get it, because they were both teachers, and they had something that when they were retired, they had something to fall back on, and they were going to be good. They didn't want to see their kid out in the world like, you might end up homeless.
You're scared. You're scared as a parent. Like suddenly you're tethered to the material world in a way I was never before becoming a parent. You can imagine your imagination is good at coming up with all the awful things that could possibly happen, and how are you going to protect your children? I made a record after my first daughter was born that was really influenced by that conversation with myself, called The Freedom to Fail, because you have to have the freedom to fail in order to grow into your whole shape.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to try for things that you can't reach. Like if you're thinking athletics, you have to jump past failure. Where you think you're going to go. You have to expand and take up the space to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. Or baseball, if you get 3 hits out of 10, you're doing great.
Yeah.
I think life in general is about trial and error.
Yeah, and striking out and going back to bat.
That's right. It's like, and there's another game tomorrow. So if you went 0 for 4 today and you don't feel good about it, well, take a couple extra cuts and get back in there tomorrow and, go after it. You're going to get a hit.
You want to teach resiliency. The best possible thing you can give to your kids is resiliency.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, I think we're ready for song 2.
All right. This is a song that I wrote, and I wrote this song after I learned how to play Hoagy Carmichael's Georgia.
All right.
Which is a beautiful, beautiful, amazing song, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. I loved it. And every time I picked up the guitar, that was what I wanted to play. And the chords are so beautiful that I just was like, all right, I'm going to do something using these chords. I changed the order, and I changed the melody, and I changed everything that I could. But I'm still ripping it off because it's so good.
Absolutely.
Like steal from the best.
That's right.
So this is a song I wrote. Don't waste a moment on that one you left behind. Don't think for a second you just might change your mind. Things would be different if the whole wide world rewind. 'Cause you could say she's crazy now. It's not like you treated her any different than all the rest. Held for a moment and told you loved her best. Maybe she just felt it deeper inside the vest. 'Cause you could say she's crazy now. She's crazy now, used to spend every single sunrise. Sleep it off and get it on again. What could make a man so unwise to slander so good a friend? Just too much for her to bear. You suck it up and breathe it out like air. After all, she saw things in you that simply were not there. And you could say she's crazy now. You could say she's crazy now. You could say she's crazy now.
Man, I love that. So Hoagy, Carmichael, Georgia. You take that, you kind of rearrange it, and as I'm listening to it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's all there. But there's also there's what I would call Beatlesy, in fact, more McCartney phrasings that were happening that I was like, okay, and then early Tom Waits.
I'm a big fan of all those.
Right, but I thought, but then my next thought was, they all liked Hoagy Carmichael.
Absolutely. You know, you just can't get away from it. The Brill Building songwriters, the guys who were writing what we call standards now, you know, they had a remarkably developed palette, harmonically speaking. You know, like, you know, people talk about 3 chords in the truth. But it's 7 chords in the truth, you know, like it's like all the diatonic chords are there, and you know, it's just I didn't come up with that.
I know,
you
but
can't quote me on that.
No, I like it because we've had 3 chords in the truth before.
Right, and it's so rich. You know, like and unfortunately, like every type of music, there's way more bad music than there is good music. You know, and I guess the distinction when I'm saying like bad versus good is just what I like. You know, what affects me, what makes me interested and stuff. And, you know, and if you dig into any genre, you'll find a little bit of wheat and a lot of chaff.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, music's like food. You know, it's everyone has their own personal taste.
I love music and food analogies. That's totally where it's at, because food nourishes the body, music nourishes the soul.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're the exact same thing. And you said it earlier, if you're doing something for someone to, I think you said make them happy or something, but if you're to me, if you're playing them music or if you're making them food, you're doing about the best thing you could possibly give them, because it's creative, right? It's an expression from my heart and soul.
Yeah. People talk about love languages, and one of my love languages is feeding. Like it's feeding the family, just make sure everybody's got something to eat. You know?
That's why Bourdain's show was so good, because he traveled around and he just went in everyone's house and ate with them.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just like, I want to do that, or I kind of do in a lot of ways. I'm like you. I've gotten to travel a lot in my life, and I always thought one of the nicest things was people invite you into their homes. I've been in a lot of people's homes, you know, and it's seeing how everyone lives. We talked about that on the phone a little bit. Like when I'm driving down the highway and I see some lone house, like, and I'll be like, somebody lives in there. I wonder what that's like. Yeah, I wonder what that experience is like to be that, you know, like everybody's got an experience they're having. Being able to share that, and it's there's no language, you know, like it's languageless.
It has been one of the greatest pleasures of my life to get to travel as a musician. It's great to travel, you know, if you know, like it's and it's absolute luxury, you know, like it is, you know, like to be able to have the freedom, the disposable income, and the relative and the safety to do it, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is impossible for me to see that to the degree that it's true.
Right.
But different than being a tourist and, you know, paying for the 4-star hotel and flying in and, you know, in first class, and, you know, it's like, and having all your needs catered to. As a musician, where you're occasionally, or more, you know, or more often than not, just sort of slumming your way across America or other parts of the world, people feel like you're bringing something, and people want to complete the circuit. You know, if you play and it's really cool, sometimes people are you know, will just come up to you and like, you were great. You know, like, you know, do you want to go do something fun tomorrow? Do you want to, you know, you want to join us? You know, in Norway, I played in a little industrial town called Oda, and got taken. You know, like the woman who was the mayor of the town invited us up to the top of the glacier that's over the town to this tiny little hut, which they go and stay in when they're hunting. And we drank the local moonshine and ate the blueberries that we picked on the way. Wow. You know, it was just like, you know, it's just amazing in that way. In Kansas City, there was an all-night called Grace's that the woman, Grace, who cooked barbecue at the Grand Emporium, a blues club there that's been around for a long time. And she had this little club called Grace's All Night that didn't really open up until midnight, and it didn't get hopping until 2:30, where people got off work and went there. And it was a gutted house in Kansas City. You knocked on the door, there was no sign. They, you know, took a look at you and decided if they were going to let you in or not. And it was just, you know, it was a piece of heaven. Everybody there was there to have a good time. You know, like there was no pretense to it. They
were industry folks too, restaurants and musicians.
Yeah. Just people who service people, got off work and wanted to relax.
Right.
And so they weren't there to be catered to. They were just there because everybody was like-minded, and they had invented their own play space.
Right. In fact, they're all catering to each other because they're used to it.
Yeah, and different musicians got off work, got there, and then they'd all play together because they were working on their gig. And you don't get to play with people all the time when you're working a whole lot. You only get to play with your unit.
Exactly.
And it's really great to play with other people. You get better by playing with people who are better than you.
Every time. Every time. I'm sure that you just want to have, to me, it's, if I had a band, everybody's better be better than me. And I'll try to entertain you up front, you know.
That's also a luxury.
Absolutely. Well, you're obviously not the guy on stage that's the least talented musically. You've really mastered your guitars and harmonicas.
Well, when I was doing Renaissance festivals, what I said before, I was working for tips. You do the show, and at the end of the show, you'd pass the hat around.
Right.
And while I was doing Renaissance festivals, I came to Austin and went down to 6th Street, Joe's Generic Bar, and there's a band, and the band's playing for tips. And, you know, I was in that awkward harmonica by the side of the stage guy phase, so I ended up getting up and play with them, and I called some obscure Bo Diddley tune, and they knew it, and I was just, this place is great.
Yeah.
And they were working for tips, and I was like, I could do this, and I wouldn't have to spend the rest of my week healing from the weekend, you know. Right. You know, I could. This is much better work.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad we got you in Austin, because you've certainly been here for some time and have really made a name for yourself here.
Town's been really good to me. I'm a lucky guy. I moved here in 1990, and I haven't had to get a real job.
That's incredible.
That's a lucky guy.
That's almost every musician's at least. I had to work at Subway. I worked in a restaurant, a record shop, or whatever. I as an actor, I damn well worked in restaurants. That's pretty incredible that you immediately found ways how to support.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked as a street musician, and
Right.
and I've always lived cheap. I have good taste, but not necessarily expensive habits.
Right. That's excellent. So when you got here and you fall in and you started going to open mics, right?
Yep. There was a place called Chicago House where I was welcomed in by the fabulous lesbian couple that ran the place, Peg and Glenda, and they instilled in me a certain reverence and sense of importance to the songwriter, which is not something that I necessarily got anywhere else up to that point. In Kansas City, there were bands that I would go see. There were bands I sometimes sat in with. There was a great songwriter by the name of Jeff Black, who's written some #1 country hits that I knew him when he was just coming up, and would go see him play and sometimes play harmonica with him. And there was an open mic scene in Kansas City too.
There was.
I was already writing songs and trying to figure out the craft of it.
Right. And you had some people to play it in front of.
Yeah, and there was a space. It was a space. It held space.
Right.
But what was different about the scene at Chicago House is that they really introduced to me the concept of a listening room, where I'd been playing in bars, with pool tables and pachinko machines or shit like that. And if you'll pardon my language,
That's all right.
Where like the game is on.
Yeah, of
so
course.
you're playing and there's all this applause and you figure, I'm doing really good. No, they just, just got a goal.
Bob Schneider once threw a beer bottle at Antone's. They put a brand new TV in the late 90s on the wall, and there was a game on, and he was playing, and he took the beer bottle and he whipped it and smashed the hell out of the TV, and he bought it. He was like, all right.
Well, he had deeper pockets than me. What I did is I borrowed the remote, turned it off, and I threw the remote away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was probably better for everybody. Have glass smashing.
Would have
down
made a
on your
better
head.
show, though, the throwing of the bottle.
Yeah,
That's rock and roll.
I missed it. I wished I was there. I taught, Ilsa that's at the door at Antone's and still there. I brought that up with her the other day, and she totally remembered it and was laughing with me about it. I think that's part of the whole reason why I like to do this show is because of those stories. It's like that's some rock and roll right there. We got you in Austin now, and we start talking about the Chicago House, and that's excellent. But now I want to talk about the Spankers, the Asylum Street Spankers.
The Asylum Street Spankers. I was already working as a musician. I had a blues band that was playing down on 6th Street. We signed a deal with Antone's Records, the first record that I made in this very building.
That's right.
In the room that's right behind us here, or on the other side of that glass, and that was it was great. It was going really well. But I also was still interested in early American music, the blues,
Right.
the jazz, the gospel, the country music, the brill building songwriters, all of
The
that other
Hoagy,
stuff.
Carmichael.
Because and I was playing harmonica and slide guitar in the blues band, and it was great, but it wasn't everything. There was still all this music that I really loved, that I really wanted to play.
Right.
And I had conceptualized that I really wanted to find a group of people that I could play this music with, that if I had to work, it could still go on and be its own thing.
Right.
And I had met some amazing musicians along the way. I met Christina Mars while she was a barista at Quackenbush's, when Quackenbush's was on the Drag, and I was busking out front. And when she was
Drag is where the UT campus is.
Yeah, we're a mess. So it's right next to the University of Texas. So big university, a lot of kids. Great place to work as a street musician.
Yeah, exactly.
And she would come out and she had a listen to for the same type of music and started singing some Bessie Smith songs, and we just played together. And I met my other friend Whammo. At a music store where he was trying out microphones and playing harp, and I was like, we got in a conversation about that. Kevin Smith was the original bass player. He's playing with Willie Nelson now.
Willie Nelson.
And
I know who that is.
Olivier Giraud eventually joined the band. He's the front guy for the 8.5 Souvenirs.
Oh, yeah.
Eamon McLaughlin played fiddle. He's playing fiddle at the Grand Ole Opry now.
Wow.
Pops Bayless and Mysterious John had been long, hard-working stalwarts of the Austin theater scene, and Pops also was in a band called Big Ed playing sort of prog rock, and so I made a cassette tape. Whammo made a cassette tape. We made a cassette tape of our favorite songs and passed them along. So we're going to do these songs. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea, like each one of those songs represented an artist who had spent a lifetime getting to that point. We didn't know. We don't, it's definitely at a certain level cultural appropriation, but it's also homage because it was just the music that we loved. You know, we're like, how can we get as close as possible to this?
Right.
And and it turns out this is as close as you can get, the seat on stage. If you're trying to brush up against it.
Right.
And it was really varied. Roy Acuff waltzes, blues, jazz, country, just all this different stuff. And we just were like, all right, we'll try it.
And it worked amazing. I mean, I know you were in it for years, and then and it still kept going for a bit. But the brunches, it sort of worked so well for those brunches back in the day.
The thing that was the most remarkable about the band is that we made the decision early on to not use a PA. That a lot of this music from the 20s and 30s was originally listened to from string bands without microphones,
right.
And we had enough theatricality in what we were doing to try to control the audience, control the room, up to the extent of having signs that said "Quiet, please."
Totally.
And when Mysterious John was making the signs, he just came up with different signs. We were called the Asylum Street Spankers. So, like on the back of one of the signs, he put "Ladies Spanked Free." And as soon as he showed that sign, there were women lining up in front of the stage. I kid you not. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but it totally became that weird thing. And nobody was getting hurt or anything. It was just, but it was so much fun. That band, when we were first starting, I could fall off my chair laughing.
Right.
And we would do it with all just seated in sort of an arc, so we could all see each other when we were playing, and it was just so much fun.
It was so entertaining, and I got to see it a few times back then, but I just remember it so fondly because it would. I'm coming from the theater, so I mean it had a lot of that to it for sure. I feel like we could do a whole nother episode. I might have to have you back.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think we got to do the one song and go on. But I enjoyed this talk so much, Guy. I thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I can talk about music all day long.
No, I could too, and I could talk with you about music all day long. And I'm like, oh man, well, again, we'll have to do another one. But let's do it. Can you close us off with another one here?
Yeah, sure. This is a song that I've written really recently. It starts like Stairway to Heaven.
Nice.
It's like, this is the anniversary, the debut of Patina, Verdiris, the greatest there will ever be, the voice of another time. The critic's darling Broadway rage, chanteuse of the Gilded Age, songbird in an open cage, forever in her prime. Over 100 years ago, she took the stage, stole the show, Vienna to the Golden Gate. She packed the house for decades straight. Footlights burn, smoke would curl, sequins dance through strings of pearls. Her melodies would ache and whirl, and always the band would play. With music like the poets wrote, the gift of life born from the throat, the truth expressed with every note, Patina Verdiris. sang the classics, made them hers. Ancients went back and changed the words, influencing songs of birds. Patina, Verdiris. Over 100 years ago, she took the stage, stole the show. Vienna to the Golden Gate, she packed the house 4 decades straight. Footlights burn, smoke would curl, sequins dance through strings of pearls. Her melodies would ache and whirl, always the band would play. 2 shows every day. Now eventually she disappeared. That's where the history gets weird. The crowd dispersed, they finally cleared her name from the marquee. New acts where she used to play, new critics deemed her sound passé. Now few have heard her name today, Patina, Verdiris. No recordings of her exist, still her memory persists. A little tarnished, yes, it fits, Patina, Verdiris. But there's magic in that silence too. Imagine what that means for you, and you will hear her coming through, Patina, Verdiris.
Bravo. Those lyrics are great, man.
Oh, thank you.
That's amazing. That's all we have time for. If you've watched this on the CW and you want to see the full interview, go to our Songwriters Across Texas YouTube channel and check it out there, and check out some other stuff, and go to Guy's website and
GuyForsyth.com.
Please go there. Get the music. He's got like 14 records or 35 or something. I don't know what it is, but anyway, thanks again, Guy, man.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate
this has been a real
you.
pleasure. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.